Hey there, story lovers. Welcome to the Storytelling Podcast, your cozy corner for captivating tales. I am your host, Alejandra, and today I invite you to come closer to our storytelling campfire and listen to a compilation at the top 10 creepy urban myths. And because we have so many tales, this episode will be divided into two episodes. So sit down by the fire, grab your snacks and drinks, and hold on tight. Because this episode is immersive and better to listen it with your headphones while dimming the light for a little ambience. But before we start, I would like to ask you for your support and click on the follow or the subscribe button if you're hearing this episode on YouTube or any podcast platform. I would really appreciate that and thank you for the lovely reviews you have been leaving on the podcast. It means the world to me. So let's get started. Urban myths mix old folklore with modern narratives, creating chilling stories that stick in your mind. Some are absurd, others downright terrifying, but they all reflect our fears and sometimes our hopes. I decided to pick up on 10 creepy urban legends, but mind you, isn't just about scary stories. It's also about the warnings and weird wisdom hidden in these tales. Haunted Places and Cautionary Tales offers us a fascinating look at how people think and what they worry about. Each legend comes with its own twists and local flavor, making you wonder what's really out there. These stories aren't just for a good scare. They often hit a nerve that runs deep, echoing fears and experiences passed down over time. They reflect our deepest anxieties and values, which is probably why they keep coming back in one form or another. It's this blend of curiosity and fear that keeps people hooked, actually. Best of all is that familiar setting, the everyday characters that make these legends feel real. Mixing a bit of history with fiction, they latch onto the real life experiences, which somehow makes them even creepier with the fear of the unknown and the superstition fueling it. When we can explain something, we invent stories to make sense of it, or at least to give us a way to talk about it. Some might have a glance of truth, other stories were so diluted by people over the centuries that we don't know anymore if they were true or not. These tales often lean into what scares us most: death, the supernatural, or breaking taboos. They give us a way to process fear, even if the answers aren't comforting. Storytelling and superstition feed off each other, making these legends hard to forget. Maybe that's why they're so much fun to share around the campfire. And this is why we are here once again. Shall we start? We're starting with Bloody Mary and the haunted mirror ritual. I don't know about you, but I did try it once. And in a different kind of house. I will have just several episodes about this house. The Bloody Mary legend centers on a spooky ritual that supposedly summons a vengeful spirit. This story that I'm going to tell you is about three girls that decided to mess with something that shouldn't be done in a slumber party. Our story begins not in a grand ancient castle, but in a mundane suburban bathroom with a flickering fluorescent light. It was a Friday night, the kind where the air was thick with a scent of popcorn and this nervous energy of teen girls. Chloe, Maya, and Sarah, the 16-year-olds old, were brimming this potential bravado and fear that they had gathered for their annual sleepover. And the main event, as always, was the summoning. Are you sure you want to do this? Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the bathroom fan. Her eyes, wide and dark, darted towards the mirror, a large, ornate rectangle that usually reflected a perfectly normal, if slightly messy, bathroom. Tonight, it felt like a portal. Chloe, the self proclaimed leader, puffed out her chest. Don't be such a chicken, Sarah. We do it every year. Nothing ever happens. Yet, even as she spoke, a tremor ran down through her. This year, something felt different. The air was colder, the silence was heavier. Maya, the ever pragmatist, held up a single flickering light. All right, rules. 3 times, in the dark, you have to look her in the eyes. The bathroom light clicked off, plunging them into a near total darkness. The only illumination came from Maya's trembling candle flame, casting dancing shadows that made the familiar towel seem like lurking specters. The mirror, now dark, reflective void, seemed to swallow the meager light. Chloe took a deep breath, her heart thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stepped forward, her reflection a ghostly silhouette in the glass. The air grew impossibly cold, raising goosebumps on her arms. Bloody Mary, she whispered, her voice crackling slightly. The candle flame wavered, almost extinguishedly. A faint, almost imperceptible shift seemed to occur in the mirror's surface, like water rippling. Bloody Mary, Maya echoed, her voice barely a breath. Her hand, holding the candle, shook violently. The shadows around them seemed to deepen, to coalesce in the indistinct shapes. Sarah, tears welling in her eyes, squeezed her eyes shut. Bloody Mary, she whispered, her voice choked with terror. And then it happened. Not a scream, not a ghoulish apparition, but something far more insidious. A whisper, cold as grave dust, seemed to slither from the mirror. It was a voice, ancient and sorrowful, murmuring a name that wasn't theirs, a name that spoke of betrayal and a broken heart. The girls felt a collective chill, a profound sense of despair washing them over. The reflection in the mirror, for a fleeting moment, seemed to twist, not in a monstrous face, but into one of profound, agonizing grief, its eyes burning with an unquenchable sorrow. The candle sputtered and died, plunging the room into absolute darkness. The girl screamed. A unified cry of pure and fear stumbled backward, fumbling for the light switch. When the light flooded the room, the mirror was just a mirror again, reflecting 3 pale, trembling faces. Nothing was physically harmed, no scratches, no broken glass, but the silence that followed was heavy with a new understanding. They hadn't just played a game, they had just touched something ancient, something sorrowful, a spirit still trapped on its own reflection. From that night on, the legend of Bloody Mary wasn't just a story, it was a memory etched into their very bones, a chilling reminder that some mirrors reflects more than an image. These girls and their chilling encounter, they said never again, and then never spoke about it again. But while we are at the fire, if someone sits down on your side, they might be wondering or simply lost in trying to get back to reality. Our next story is about the vanishing hitchhiker. The vanishing hitchhiker is one of those stories that just won't die. It usually features a ghostly passenger who disappears without a trace, leaving the driver shaken and confused. Our story unfolds on a stretch of Old Route 7, a road notorious for its sharp curves and dense whispering woods. It was a night when the moon played hide and seek behind bruised clouds, and the rain, softly drizzled at first, began to intensify. Mark, a weary traveling salesman, was pushing his old sedan through the gloom eager to reach out the next town and having a warm bed. Suddenly, in the beam of his headlights, a figure materialized by the roadside. A young woman, dressed in all what looked like a thin white dress, stood shivering, her arms tentatively raised. Despite his exhaustion, Mark's conscience pricked him. No one should be here out in a night like this. He pulled over, the gravel crunching under his tires. The woman slipped into the passenger seat, bringing with her a faint scent of damp earth and something else. Something like lilies or perhaps old lace? She was strikingly pale, her dark hair clinging to her face, and her eyes held a profound sadness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain drumming on the roof. "I'm going to the old Miller place, just a few miles up." Mark nodded, a little unnerved by her quiet intensity. He tried to make a small talk, asking about her journey, but her answers were brief, almost evasive. She spoke about the dance, a party, and a late night walk, but her words felt hollow, disconnected. The air inside the car grew noticeably colder despite the heater blasting. As they approached to turn off the Miller place, a long abandoned farmhouse known for its tragic history, Mark glanced over to confirm her destination. "Almost there," he said, but the seat beside him was empty. Mark slammed on the brakes, his heart leaping into his throat. He spun his head around, checking the back seat, the floorboards. Nothing. The passenger door was securely latched. There was no way she could have opened and vanished in a few seconds. He looked away. Trembling, he drove the short distance into the dilapidated Miller farmhouse. The porch light, long dead, offered no welcome. He stumbled out of the car, rain plastering his clothes to his skin, and approached the decaying front door. A faded, tarnished plaque was nailed beside it. He squinted, reading the inscription: Eleanor Vance, born 1905, died October 27, 1925. Beloved daughter, lost too soon. October 27th. Tonight's the date. Mark stumbled back to his car, the scent of lily suddenly overwhelming. He drove away, leaving the Miller place and its ghostly occupant behind. But the memory of those sad, pale eyes and the chilling emptiness of the passenger seat would haunt his drives for the rest of his life. Hmm, didn't your parents told you not to invite people into your car? Mark now knows the rule. Our next story is about Kuchisake Onna, or the slit-mouthed woman. This is a nightmare straight out of Japanese folklore. This urban legend dives into themes of vengeance, revenge, and supernatural terror. And it has left a real mark on the Japanese culture. This next story actually creeps me out. There is something of the Asian urban myths that I believe more than anything. But please, never look at her. Our story begins with Kenji, a high school student hurrying home after a late cram session. The city lights blurred around him, reflecting off the damp pavement. It was a typical Tokyo night, cool and quiet, save for the hum of distant traffic. Kenji was lost in thought, reviewing calculus formulas when a figure appeared from the shadows on an alleyway. It was a woman, seemingly ordinary, perhaps in her late 20s. She wore a long trench coat, and her face was partially obscured by a surgical mask, common sight in Japan. She stood still, directly into his path. Kenji, polite by nature, tried to step around her, offering her a small bow, but she didn't move. Instead, her head tilted slightly, and her voice, though muffled by the mask, was surprisingly clear, almost melodic. Am I pretty? She asked. Kenji paused, a flicker of unease stirring within him. It was a strange question from a stranger in the dead of the night. He hesitated then, wanting to be polite and avoid trouble. He replied, Yes, you are. A faint smile seemed to form beneath the mask. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she reached up and pulled the mask down. Kenji's breath caught in his throat. What he saw made his blood run cold from ear to ear. Her mouth was grotesquely slit, a permanent, terrifying grin carved into her face, revealing teeth that were too long and too sharp. Her eyes, previously hidden in shadow, now gleamed with an unnerving intensity. The melodic voice, now chillingly clear through the horrific gash, repeated the question, but with a terrifying addition. Am I pretty now? Time seemed to freeze. Kenji's mind raced, desperate for an answer that wouldn't seal his fate. He knew the legends, and no meant instant death. A simple yes meant she would disfigure him to match her. He remembered a faint whisper from an old student, a trick to buy time. You're average, he stammered, the word feeling like ash into his mouth. The woman's eye narrowed, a flicker of confusion crossing his monstrous face. She seemed momentarily taken aback, her head tilting again, as if processing the unexpected response. This was his chance. Kenji didn't wait. He turned and ran, sprinting down the street faster than he ever had in his life, not daring to look back. He ran until his lungs burned, and the city lights seemed to spin around him until he was sure he was safe. He never saw her again, but every time he saw someone wearing a surgical mask, every time he walked alone at night, a cold dread would grip him. He would remember the melodic voice, the horrific smile, and the chilling question that almost claimed him. The legend of Kuchisake Onna wasn't just a story anymore. It was a nightmare that walked the streets, waiting for the unwary to ask if she was pretty. Your words and actions can follow you and haunt you, so keep that in mind. But talking about women in the urban myths, there is someone that it's worldwide known. And maybe people find her the epitome of scary. But what about if she is misunderstood? La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, haunts the nightmares of kids and adults alike. Her story is especially big in Latin America, where she's both a warning to children and is the staple of scary storytelling. Our story takes us to a small, quiet town nestled beside the winding Rio Grande. It was a stifling summer night, the kind where the air hangs heavy and still, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Miguel, a young man of 17, had snuck out of his house, drawn by the promise of a clandestine meeting with his friends down by the riverbank. He knew his grandmother's warning about the river after dark, about the duende and the spiritus, but tonight adventure called it louder than caution. He walked along the dusty path, the river a dark shimmering ribbon in the moonlight. A cool breeze, unexpected for the season, swept through the cottonwood trees, rustling their leaves like hushed whispers. Then he heard it, a sound that wasn't the wind, nor the crickets, nor the gently current of the river. It was a cry, faint at first, then growing clearer, cutting through the night with an unbearable sorrow. It was the sound of a woman weeping, a deep, guttural lament, filled with an anguish so profound it seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air. Miguel froze. Every story his abuela has ever told him about La Llorona, the woman who drowned her children in a fit of despair and now roamed the waterways, forever searching for them, flooded his mind. He told himself it was just a wind or an animal, but his heart hammered against his ribs like a frantic drum. The weeping grew closer, seeming to drift from the river itself. It was a sound that promised eternal grief, a sound that spoke of a mother's unending regret. He could almost feel the cold despair clinging to the air around him. He peered through the moonlight shadows, his breath catching in his throat. And there, by the water's edge, a figure emerged, tall and slender, dropped in a flowing white gown that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly luminescence. Her long, dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She moved with an eerie grace, gliding rather than walking, her bare feet seemingly not touching the ground. Miguel couldn't see her face, but he didn't need to. The sheer, overwhelming sorrow emanating from her, combined with that soul piercing wail, was enough. He felt a primal terror grip him, a fear that rooted him to the spot. He wanted to run, to scream, but he couldn't move, couldn't make a sound. She paused, her back to him, her hands outstretched towards the dark, swirling water. And then her head slowly, agonizingly slow, began to turn to him. That was all Miguel needed. The spell of terror broke. He turned and ran, not caring where he was going, just away from that weeping, spectral figure. He ran until his lungs burned, until he collapsed, gasping on his own porch. He never saw her face that night, and for that he was eternally grateful. But the sound of her cry, that desolate, searching wail, was etched in his memory forever. From that night on, Miguel understood his grandmother's warnings. He knew that some sorrows are too great for the grave to hold, and that sometimes the most terrifying ghost is the one you only hear forever weeping for what she has lost. I think I need a glass of water, and also the lake that is nearby us is looking lovely for a midnight dipping, don't you think? But what about something near us, especially as a parent? Do you know about the babysitter and the man upstairs? The babysitter urban myth preys on the fear of being alone in a strange house at night. A babysitter, kids asleep upstairs, and a series of creepy phone calls. But what could possibly go wrong? Our story is about Sarah, a babysitter from Washington that loves horror movies, but never once thought that her life could become one. This story happened on an ordinary Saturday night. Sarah, a responsible teenager, was babysitting for the Millers, a new family in town. The house was large, a little too quiet, but the two kids were fast asleep upstairs. Sarah settled onto the plush sofa, a bowl of popcorn on her lap, and the glow of the television her only company. The evening passed, uneventful, until around 11 p.m. The phone rang, a jarring sound in the silent house, and Sarah answered, expecting Mrs. Miller to check in. Hello? A raspy, distorted voice on the other end simply grunted.
Have you checked on your children?
Sarah frowned. Who is this? She asked, a prickle of unease starting on her stomach. The voice chuckled, a wet, unpleasant sound.
Just check on them.
And then the line went dead. Sarah's heart began to beat a little faster. It was probably just a prank call, she told herself. Kids from school. Still, she got up and quietly ascended the stairs, peeking into the children's rooms. They were both sound asleep, undisturbed, peaceful. She returned to the living room, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. Minutes later, the phone rang again. Sarah hesitated, but picked it up. Hello?
Are the children safe?
The same voice rasped, closer this time, more insistent. Yes, they're fine, said Sarah, her voice firmer than she felt. Look, if this is a prank, it's not funny.
You should leave.
The voice warned, a low growl now.
Get out of the house.
Sarah felt a cold dread spread through her. This wasn't a prank. The voice was too menacing, too close. She slammed the phone down and immediately called the police, her fingers trembling as she dialed. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone calling me, threatening me. I'm a babysitter and they're telling me to leave the house. Sarah blurted out, her voice high with panic. The dispatcher tried to calm her. Ma'am, can you trace the call? Do you know where it's coming from? Sarah glanced at the old rotary phone, then back on the dark hallway leading to upstairs. No. Wait, can you trace it from your end? A pause. Then the dispatcher's voice, now urgent, almost a shout. Get out of the house now! We've traced the call! It's coming from inside the house, from the upstairs extension! Sarah didn't even hang up. She dropped the phone, the receiver clattering against the floor, and bolted. She didn't look upstairs. She didn't grab her bag. She didn't even think about the children. Pure, primal fear propelled her out of the front door into the cold night air and down the street, screaming for help. The police arrived minutes later, finding the house silent and the front door ajar. The children were safe, still asleep in their beds, but the upstairs phone dangling from its receiver, swaying slightly in the sudden draft. The Miller later confirmed they had no man upstairs living with them, no relatives, no one. The legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs serves as a terrifying reminder that sometimes the call is coming from inside the house, and true horror can be found when you're least expected. And to finalize this first episode night by the fire, I couldn't end up without talking about the Latin America's legend number one that has terrified farmers and sparked countless investigations. Of course, we're talking about Chupacabra, or the goat sucker. Our story takes us to a small, isolated ranch in rural Puerto Rico, where the nights are long and the stars hang like diamonds in the velvet sky. Mateo, a hard-working rancher, prided himself on his small herd of goats, and their bleating was a familiar comfort in the quiet evenings. He'd heard of whispers, of course, the local tales of something strange, something that drained the life of livestock, leaving behind only puncture marks. He dismissed them as superstition, the fears of simple folk. One sweltering night, Mateo was awoken by a commotion from his goat pen. A frantic bleating, louder and more desperate than usual, following by the series of terrified whimpers. His heart pounded. That wasn't the sound of a stray dog. He grabbed his old lantern and his trusty machete, rushing out into the humid darkness. The air was thick with the scent of fear and something else, something acrid, like sulfur or stale blood. As he approached the pen, the sounds abruptly ceased. An unnatural silence fell over the ranch, broken only by the frantic thumping of his own heart. He swung the lantern's beam across the enclosure. The gate was intact, no sign of forced entry, but then he saw it. One of his prized nanny goats lay on its side, utterly still. Its eyes were wide, frozen in a look of pure terror. There was no blood, no struggle evident on the ground, but on its neck, two small, precise puncture marks, like those of a vampire. The goat's body felt strangely cold, and its skin was shriveled, and all of the fluid has been meticulously drained. Mateo stumbled back, the lantern shaking in his hands. This was no ordinary predator. This was what the old timers spoke of. This was El Chupacabra. He spent the rest of the night huddled in his house, listening to the sounds of the night. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl, sending shivers down his spine. He tried to tell himself it was a coyote, a wild dog. But the image of that lifeless, trained goat and the strange, clean wounds haunted him. The next night he set a vigil. He sat on his porch, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning on the darkness. Around the same time, just past midnight, he heard it again. A faint, almost imperceptible rustling in the brush just beside the goat pen. He raised his rifle, straining his eyes. Then, a flicker of moment. Something low to the ground, moving with an unnatural, jerky speed. It was small, no bigger than a medium sized dog, but its movements were too fluid, too silent. It seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, its skin rough and scaly, its eyes, two pinpricks of glowing red, locked onto him. And from its mouth, two sharp, glistening fangs protruded. Mateo didn't hesitate. He fired. The creature let out a high-pitched, unearthly yelp, a sound that was both animal and something far more alien, and then it vanished in the darkness as quickly as it appeared. He searched for hours, but found no trace, no blood, nothing but the lingering, acrid smell. Mateo never saw El Chupacabra again, but he knew it was real. He knew the fear it instilled, the mystery it embodied. The legend of El Chupacabra wasn't just a story whispered in the fields. It was a terrifying reality, a cryptid of the night, forever lurking in the shadows, a chilling reminder that some creatures defy explanation and hunt in ways we can barely comprehend. Did you like all the tales around the campfire? Shall we meet next week and get the part 2? If you can make it alive from here, or if you aren't scared of listening. And this was today's episode, guys. I hope you liked it, and comment below and share your thoughts. It's always nice to hear from you guys. I promise that I have other episodes ready for you here weekly at the Storytelling Podcast, and next week will be the part 2 of this creepy urban legends. Thank you for listening, and please remember that if you like to send your stories or special topics to be shared in the next episodes, please send it to thestorytellingpodcast80 at gmail.com or follow me on social media at the Storytelling Podcast Official. But before you go, if you haven't done that already, I would love for you to click on the follow or the subscribe button, and see you on the next episode.